Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni moli wanji, namaste, jumbo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so delighted and so very honored that you join us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to subscribe to the show in the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Good Pods, Himalaya, Ghana, wherever you find your podcasts. Our guest today is Dr. Monica Schott. She is here to celebrate her children's book, My Dad Built Me the Best and Wackiest Cubby Ever. Before we invite Dr. Monica into the studio, we want to invite you to check out one of our favorite podcasts, Rise and Shine with Yobi Q. Yobi has been a guest here on the podcast many times. She's a fascinating woman. She's a mom. She's an author. She's an entrepreneur. And she is an expert in the field of childcare, having opened and operated a number of childcare facilities on her own. In Rise and Shine with Yobi Q, Yobi interviews some of the brightest talents in the childcare education field. It really is fascinating. If you have an interest in entrepreneurship, if you have an interest in childcare and education, if you just have an interest in kids and the best practices and to how to raise those kids to be healthy and happy, you want to check out Rise and Shine with Yobi Q. You can find it wherever you find your podcast. Join us right now from the beautiful city of Melbourne in Australia. Our guest is here today to celebrate. I love the title of this book. The name of the book is My Dad Built Me the Best and Wackiest Cubby Ever. Please welcome to the show Dr. Monica Schott. Dr. Monica, how are you?
Hi, Jed. I'm well, thank you. Bit fresh in Melbourne, but I'm well.
I hear, I was talking to Dr. Monica beforehand. My chosen daughter, Jing Jing, is now a citizen of Melbourne. She just moved, and Dr. Monica was telling me that she moved at I don't know if the best time or the worst time. It's really cold and windy and raw in Melbourne right now.
Yes, coming from Brisbane, I'm sure she would have had a bit of a shock.
Well, I'm sure that she is going to love living in your community. She wanted to live in a bigger, she said Brisbane was too small. It felt like a small town. And that Melbourne, she's really looking forward to the new start that she's going to have in Melbourne. But enough about my family. Let's talk about your book. My Dad Built Me the Best and Wackiest Cubby Ever. Tell us all about this book.
So it's a kid's book. It's a chapter book. But I have to say that since its release, a lot of adults are reading it, and the comments coming from them are basically, it's the kid's book that every adult should read. And so it's a story about a child who sets out to build a cubby house with its father. And along the way, the father becomes unwell. And so the story is about that, but the father's mental health aligns with the building of the cubby, because the cubby grows wackier as the dad becomes more unwell. But it also aligns with the changing weather and the emotions that are running through the story. And so you kind of end up with this really nice flow of the story about the dad and the child, but also the weather and how it begins sunny and then the clouds brew and then the storm comes in and then it clears and, the family are quite settled and the father is back to some good health.
There's so many things that jump through my mind as you're describing the book, and there's a part of me that is thinking, for somebody listening out there thinking, oh, why do we have to talk to kids about mental health and they should be happy and not have to worry about all this stuff. But as somebody who grew up with a dad who had very serious mental health issues, I probably could have used a book like this. But of course, when I grew up almost 100 years ago, no one talked about it. In fact, when my dad was hospitalized for a number of years, it was, where's Dad? He's in the hospital. What's wrong? Break his leg, have a pneumonia, whatever. He'll be home soon. And then he wasn't, and wasn't talked about at all.
No. And that's really what got me to write the book. It was about 13, 14 years ago that my young children at the time were seeing their father become depressed. And they were 8 and 9 at the time, and they had experience with my brother, who ever since they were born and they could remember, they'd seen him really quite unwell with schizophrenia, depression, and severe paranoia. And so when they saw their father unwell, and you know, like you just said, there's no broken leg or broken arm. You can't see anything unwell. But they knew something wasn't right. And so I had to sit down and tell them what was going on, and I had to explain it to them honestly, because, you know, I think children understand far more than what we give them credit for sometimes. And so I had to explain it to them honestly, but in a way that made sense to them. And with my brother, we'd spent so many years going to family classes, understanding his mental health. So we had a bit of background on what was going on with the brain. And so as a parent back then, I was always looking for books to help me explain things to my kids. And so I went looking for a book to help me explain what was going on around their father's mental health. And I couldn't find anything. So anyway, after I got through explaining to my boys what was happening to their father, you know, over a period of time, I decided to write my own book, because I knew that I couldn't be the only person out there that needed such a resource. And, you know, kids deserve honesty, I suppose, and to help them understand what's going on with their parents, because, like you said, you can't see anything wrong with the brain, but you know something's not right either.
It is, and there's so much. Mental health and the way it affects families is so complex. And, you know, there's a lot of hurt involved and a lot of anger and a lot of confusion, and there's nothing that can necessarily take away the hurt or the pain. But if we can deal with some of the confusion and help our kids, certainly it would have helped me if I understood a little bit more about what was going on with my dad. It would have helped me have a little bit more empathy for him, and instead of just anger, I'm sure the anger would still have been there. But it would have been like, yeah, I don't like what happened. It really shouldn't have happened, and it's wrong, and it can't happen again, but it's not totally his fault.
No, that's exactly right. And I think what I've seen in my children is that, you know, like I said, they've grown up with my brother's mental ill health, and they've grown to be really quite patient and understanding, and they have developed this empathy that has made them really quite beautiful men with such gentle understanding. And, you know, when I was telling them as little boys that their father was unwell, and I went to talk about the brain, because and the science around that, and the chemical imbalance that was going on in the brain, and how our brains need to be chemically balanced. And in the book I talk about that, and I related to, I don't know if you remember this or any of your listeners remember this, but as kids we would make a paper mache volcano. And inside the volcano, we would have bicarb of soda, and you pour vinegar in, and then you have this explosion coming out through the top of your paper mache volcano. And so I use that analogy in the book for kids because I think they can understand that. And it's not really about the explosion. It's about getting the right amount of chemicals, which in the volcano experiment is the bicarb and the vinegar, so that you have the desired effect. And so relating that to the brain and how, if you don't have the right amount of chemicals supporting each other and going on at the right time, well, then there's an imbalance and the result is the behaviours that you can see in someone who who doesn't have good mental health.
Right. Yeah. There's so much, as we're talking about and acknowledging, we didn't talk about this at all when I was a kid. We're talking about it now, but even so, there still aren't a lot of books out there, and we still don't talk a lot about it. Maybe a family that's experiencing it, hopefully, someone in the family will be able to start a conversation, and those conversations can happen. But outside of a family that's directly dealing with mental health, I don't think there's a lot of conversations going on. We talk about cancer and we raise money for cancer research, and everybody knows somebody who's experienced a broken leg or a broken wrist, but we still, if we're blessed to be in a family that's not experiencing mental illness, I don't think we have those conversations. And I don't know. I think it could be helpful overall for our society if we did start having some conversations as a society.
Yeah. Look, I agree. And I mean, when I wrote the book, I started writing the book 13 years ago. So probably 10 years ago, the book was, ready and going out to commercial publishers, and it was being knocked back, and publishers were saying, oh, it's a, great story, but, I'm not really sure that the market's ready for this kind of a story. And then, we launched the book in July this year, and I had, I'm not sure whether listeners are aware, Professor Pat McGorry, who is internationally renowned for his work in mental health for young people. So he works out of the University of Melbourne and does a lot of research around it. And he came to launch the book, and even at the launch, he was saying, we need more of this stuff, more of these books. And, 20 years ago, there was no way known we could have this kind of a book in the marketplace, and people weren't discussing mental health. And even though the stigma is still there, it is starting to be broken down. I think it has a long way to go still, but, in Australia, there is a lot of work going on in workplaces, for example, with mental health first aiders. There are mental health programs running throughout Australia to celebrate good mental health and support people who are struggling with their mental health. So, Pat was saying, even though we are talking more about it now, and although our COVID lockdowns had something to do with that, people were starting to understand a little bit more about mental health, there is still some way to go. But it is important for this kind of a book to be shared between adult and child. And, I think I said to you earlier before we started that the really interesting thing is that a lot of adults are reading the book for themselves, for their own mental health, and they are saying how much it's helping them. Women who have suffered postnatal depression. The book's being used by Lifeline. It's being used in schools by teachers with their classes. So, and a lot of people are now saying, it's the kids' book that every adult should be reading. So that's really heartwarming for me and really positive. And I never imagined that the story would affect people in that kind of a way. But obviously I'm thrilled, and that's what I've always hoped for.
Yeah. It is wonderful that it is reaching such a great audience. I'm wondering, I have a lot of questions that I want to ask you about this, but where did you find the inspiration the resilience to keep on plugging. You're talking about 15 years ago, you started sharing the book and people were like going, nah, we're not ready for this, and go away, and no one's going to talk. We're not going to buy this book. No one's going to buy this book. But you kept at it, and it must have been difficult. Where did you find the resiliency to keep at it?
If you ask my mum, she'd probably say I've got a hard head. Because I sincerely believed that we need to break down the stigma. I could see people talking about my brother, and I could see the conversations that weren't being had either. Like, it was really interesting, and a lot of people are scared of the behaviours that are coming out of poor mental health. And I mean, I was one of them. I was scared of my brother to begin with until I really got to understand it. And so what's kept me going is that I really believe that we need to break down the stigma around mental health. And I think, the huge statistics that are being thrown around now about, I've got some here globally, 2021, 1 in 7 10 to 19-year-olds experience mental health disorder around the world. Wow. Those statistics are huge, and they're growing, and so if we can start to give some understanding to kids, surely that will help them to manage their own mental health, to become healthier adults, and to help and be more considerate of people who are experiencing poor mental health. So I just really believe it, and I just didn't want to give up on that, and I still don't.
Well, I'm delighted that you kept on going. We talk here on the podcast a lot about the importance of representation and how valuable it is for kids to be able to see themselves or their families on the pages of books portrayed positively. And I truly believe that. But I think it is just as important, as we were touching on earlier, for kids who aren't in a particular book to be able to see others, again, portrayed positively. So, for a kid to be able to see a person of a different culture or different race, a person who, it's so valuable, I think, for a kid to be able to look in and see the pain and the challenges that a family with a person who is suffering from mental health issues has to go through. And what a much better place it would be for everybody if those kids who were blessed to be in a mentally healthy family could develop empathy for their classmates, because every kid is in a class, and there's a kid in every classroom that is dealing with some sort of mental illness, whether it's themselves, a family member, dad, mother, and uncle. It's out there, and
yeah, it is.
Yeah, we don't know about it because we still don't talk about it.
No, that's right, and I think it's more so that it's rare that someone isn't touched by a mental health story in some kind of a way. When I since launching the book, I'm so surprised at the amount of people that still come to me and say, this book has touched me in such a way. And, I hear from a teacher in one of the schools that's using it, and how, it's explored in the classroom through various ways. And because we develop teachers' resources to go with the book. And so the teachers are using those resources to explore the book in class, and then the kids go away and interpret what they've been reading, and the work that they're producing is just amazing, because they really are understanding the struggles of someone who is experiencing mental health. And so the empathy is coming through their work, which, that's just so beautiful. I mean, you can't really hope for anything more. And then I look at the other extreme. I was in a classroom the other week where this particular classroom is for kids who are just about lost to the education system at primary school level. So when I say primary school level, that's up to 12 years old. And some of these kids are nearly lost in the education system, and they go to this school to try and reintegrate them or integrate them back into the classroom. And I mean, it's a it's a long process. It's a whole year to do this, but looking in their classroom, they have this huge wall that talks about all the different emotions and the understanding around good mental health. And when I saw that, I was just so touched because it aligns so beautifully with the emotions that run through the story of my cubby book. And so the empathy, I think, is being developed. It's just a slow process, I think.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I'm so happy that you mentioned that there are so many adults coming to you saying that this book helped them. And, I've read a fair amount of books aimed at adults trying to help them deal with different, understanding different mental illnesses and self-help books and everything. And I got to tell you, it's a slog. Most of those books are really, really tough to get through. And so I think a book written for kids on that middle grade level, I think middle grade books are fantastic for everybody. One of my favorite middle grade authors is from Sydney, Australia, and the books are delightful. And it doesn't surprise me that this book is resonating with adults. And I'm so happy that it's getting out there.
Yeah, so am I. And I'm so pleased that you're interested in the book. I have to say that. I don't think I said that earlier on when we started.
Well, it's like I said, this is something, that I had to deal with. And in some ways, I think my siblings may still be dealing with it. I think I had the, I think the reason why I went and studied psychology and wanted to be a social worker when I was in college was kind of trying to figure out how to help myself. And the 10 years that I spent in human services were probably more therapeutic for me than, or hopefully, they were also therapeutic for the people I was serving. And then I got healthy and became a clown. So, But what's now that you've written, My Dad Built Me the Best and Wackiest Cubby Ever, and it's resonating with folks, are we going to have to wait another 15 years for your next book to come out, your next kids' books to come out, or are you working on something that you can tell us a little bit about?
No, it won't be that 15 years again. I'm working on a couple of books, actually. One is probably an adult book, a social history about a community that lived on an agricultural research facility. But for the kids' books, I am working on a book called Camp Koala, and it's about a group of kids who go camping with their families and find these dead koalas in the bush. And so the story is about that and why the koalas are turning up dead. But, kids being kids with vivid imaginations, they have all kinds of theories and think about the ogres and the different scary kind of people out there who could be killing the koalas.
Well,
and I won't give the ending away.
No, don't do that. But do put us on the calendar when that book is available. We'd love for you to come back on and talk about that because
sure.
Books are just such a great way for us to travel to different worlds. Worlds that we may not be able to get to right away, but we can pick up a book and take a trip to Australia and check out the koalas and who's killing the koalas.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Books are fantastic to escape into another world.
They are. And we've had a number of guests here on the podcast who have talked about their own challenges growing up, whether it was being raised in an abusive foster home or being raised in a family dealing with mental illness. And so many of them have shared with us that books were their refuge. It was their place to kind of go and find some safety, but more than anything else, be able to find some hope and turn their lives around. So I am delighted that there are people finding some hope and some understanding and some empathy through your book. Where can we find out more about the book and find out more about you?
So you can go to my website, monicashott.com, Monica spelled with a K, and it's SCHOTT. The book you can also find it anywhere online, Amazon or from my website. But there's quite a bit on my website if anyone wants to know more.
And there's a lovely snowy picture on your website. Is that Australian snow that I see there?
No chance. That's from Finland. Finland, one of the shortest days of the year. Beautiful.
Yeah. Well, this has been a beautiful conversation. We're really happy that you're able to spend some time with us. We've been talking to the author of My Dad Built Me the Best and Wackiest Cubby Ever, a great middle grade novel dealing with mental illness, from our guest, Dr. Monica Schott. Hey, Dr. Monica, thanks so much for being with us.
And thank you, Jed. It's been a pleasure.
Please be sure to join us for the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest would be Kevin Carey. He's the author of Junior Miles and the Junk Man. A really fascinating conversation about this great middle grade novel. Also about how we can encourage our kids to become or explore the creative writing field. Kevin is the coordinator of creative writing at Salem State University here in Massachusetts. It's a fascinating conversation. You don't want to miss it. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, we're going to start by thanking our guest, Dr. Monica Schott. Please be sure to check out her wonderful book, My Dad Made Me the Best and Wackiest Cubby Ever. Also want to encourage you to check out our friend Yobi Q's great podcast. It's called Rise and Shine with Yobi Q. I want to thank my team, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Soji Franklin, Ann O'Leary. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.